Good morning. Good morning, my precious people, wherever you're joining me from. My name is Daryl Bennett, Daryl J. Bennett. And today we're going to talk about how to rise again after crises. How to rise again after crises. Let me set the stage and set a powerful intention that somebody listening to me today is going to understand themselves in a different way by the time that I'm done. They're going to see their life differently, their dreams differently, their hopes differently, the things that have been put on the inside of them, to recognize that you're exactly where you need to be. You're on the path. You were always on the path. How to rise again after crises. If I had the subtitle to put on this, it would be How to Stop Digging and Start Climbing. There's a lot of people who are struggling with crises, and it's not the same crises for everybody. For some people, it's financial. There are a lot of people dealing with a financial crisis during this period because of the way that the global economy is going. There are a lot of folks that even though they're making hundreds of thousands and in some cases millions of dollars, I have friends like this, they're under the crush of debt. They're under the crush of bad decisions that they made in the past. And so they're struggling with how to navigate life after crises, how to navigate life after trouble, how to navigate life when life isn't what you thought it would be. Now, y'all remember Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was probably one of the greatest fighters of his day. And they asked him at the height of his power, they asked him, they said, you must be the most studied fighter in the world, but nobody can beat you. How is that? And he said, well, everybody has a plan before they get punched in the face. And life will punch you in the face. I'm going to talk a little bit about my story and why I'm uniquely equipped to speak on this. Life will punch you in the face. Life will cause things to happen in your life where you look up and say, how did I get here? And today is the beginning for you to learn how to rise again. And we're going to talk about very specific practical things that you can do to get to the next level, to stop digging and start climbing, to rise again. This is not your last moment. Your best is ahead of you if you believe. And if you start taking concrete steps right where you are. Theodore Roosevelt, one of my favorite presidents, said, do what you can with what you have where you are. No, I didn't hear him say that. But it has been passed down through the corridors of time. Do what you can with what you have. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. You can't use what you don't have. You can't use what you don't have. You got to stop talking about what would life be if you didn't go through the divorce, and what would life be if you hadn't made those financial decisions, and what would it be if you hadn't had that situation happen in the past. I want to help you get off of someday island, someday isle. The aisle of someday I'll do this and someday I'll do that, because you're thinking about what life would be. You cannot use what you don't have. And you know what I have learned? Everybody, I'm gonna start the presentation in a second, but I just want to talk before I talk. Everybody in life has an if I. You're not unique to that. If I had spent more time in school, and if I had had my father in my life, and if I had not have gone through the divorce, and if I had better relationship strategies, and if I had more money, and if I, and if you're not careful, you'll spend your whole life and it'll pass you by while you're in the land of if I. This is your season. This is your moment. This is your time to rise again. I don't believe anything's by accident. Whether you're listening to me live, I'm streaming this live across my LinkedIn, across my YouTube, across my Facebook. And usually I don't do all three platforms this way, but I understand that we're in a unique moment collectively, nationally, globally. We're dealing with so much uncertainty. What seemed to be so certain even 2 years ago, we look at now and it's like, oh my goodness, every system has been shaken. What we're going to talk about today is as much about pivoting, is as much about rising from the ashes, as it is about changing what you value, redefining what you put your trust in. This is your moment to stop living in the past, to stop living and talking about what would life be if that thing didn't occur. And have you considered that maybe what you're calling a crisis is going to push you into your destiny? I once heard it said that life will provoke pain to push you into your purpose. You have a purpose. That's why I'm streaming this on my LinkedIn. And it's bigger than your job. Can I tell you something? The only thing that's certain about a job is that one day you won't have one. One day you won't have one. I'm not talking about your job. I'm talking about your work. I'm talking about what you've been called to do. There's a purpose over your life. There's a destiny for your life. And I want to show you how to use what was meant to destroy you, whether it happened to you or it happened because of bad decisions you made, and how you can begin to stop digging and start climbing. All right, now, I'm really excited about what I want to share today because I know this is going to help someone right where you are, because I can't help you where you're not. All I can do is help you where you are. Let me talk about what we're going to talk about today. First, I'm going to share a little bit about why I'm uniquely qualified to speak on this topic. I'm Darrell J. Bennett. I'm one of the few people in the world that has seen so many highs and seen so many lows. I've overcome and gotten past what people swore would destroy me. Depression, imprisonment, abandonment, estrangement, crises through identity, loss of titles and possessions and influence. And yet, this is the irony, that I'm better now than before the crises. That's why I'm uniquely qualified to talk about this. This isn't just about surviving what you're going through. This is about prospering. This is about that there is a latter glory that's going to be greater than the former glory. Anybody that knew me before the crises in my life will tell you I'm doing better in every aspect now. And I'm going to talk about it's not by my might and it's not by my power, but I understand purpose and I'm in a divine flow. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Okay, so we're going to talk about why I'm uniquely qualified to talk about this topic. Then we're going to talk about how we help people. I want to help you. I want to help you. This is why I'm on here to talk about this today. I want to help you stop living in the past. What would the world be if we all had more grace for each other? What would the world be? Half of what we see on social media would just drop right off if we had more grace for each other, because we'd have more grace for ourselves. But I'm going to talk about that later. You can't give what you don't have. If you're holding aught against yourself for things you did in the past, certainly you can't forgive others. I want to show you how to get past the shame and past the embarrassment and past the guilt and past the spaces and places that you can't change. You cannot put the toothpaste back in the toothpaste bottle, whatever it is, back in the tube. You can't do it. You can't unscramble the eggs. It's over. It's done with. But the question is, what will you do with now? I want to talk about who we help. I know. Most people, when they think about crisis, they think about the guy living under the bridge. But the truth of the matter is, the folks that I deal with most, these are folks that are business executives. These are folks who are leaders of companies and institutions and organizations. These are people in positions of power, high net worth. I say so-called high net worth individuals. We'll talk about that, because if you count your worth as a paper dollar, you've already lost. But I'll get to that. I work with people who are at the higher rungs of so-called society, because these are the folks, these are the people that are struggling in some cases under the crushing, crippling cycle of debt. These are people who have a lot of folks around them who act like they're friends, but they're not really their friends, because this is the irony about the guy under the bridge, perhaps homeless at the moment. Whoever counts him as a friend and says they're his friend probably really is their friend. But when you are on top, it's funny how many people are in your circle, but let something happen in your life. Let you lose that job as a CEO. I know people. I have people that I work with. 2 years ago, they were CEOs of major companies. Now, not so much. And the people that said that they would be with them to the end, where are they at? Well, I guess they were with you to the end. I work with people who are struggling with identity, not identity as the world calls identity. I'm not talking about sexuality. I'm not talking about surface identity. I'm talking about identity, and they're struggling with, how do I define who I am? People who live their whole lives tethered to the name of the family that they've come from. And then something happens, and now what? People whose entire focus is the stock number or the ticker on the NASDAQ of the company that they're running, that they are running. And then when that doesn't go well, when something happens, then what? There's a company that I was working with not too long ago. I would say 18 months ago, they were at one stock price. Now they're a tenth of that. And folks had to be released. And you could see the stress on people's faces. I'm talking about not the folks necessarily that lost jobs, which is why I say, and I'll say it again, the only thing that's certain about a job is that one day you won't have one. But I'm talking about folks who were running the companies, folks who owned the companies, folks who walked in the room differently when the stock price was different. And now who are you? When none of that's, when you don't have any of that. And that's why I'm uniquely qualified to talk about this. I think that everybody should go through an experience where you lose everything. I don't wish bad on anybody, but I think you've got to lose the things you're attached to so you find out who you really are. It was in the times when everybody, and not everybody, but most of the people walked away in my life, and when things were totally dark, that I really began to see, who am I really? You've got to know who you really are in this world where so much is shifting and so much is shaking. I work with people who are elected officials. I don't put this out there, of course not, because I'm working with them privily. People who are in positions of great authority. One person, I remember, he said to me, he said, Daryl, I wish I could live like you. I said, well, what do you mean? We went to school together. And this person is on track to probably be a Supreme Court justice at some point. He said, I really wish I could just talk the way I want to talk, but I know for me to perhaps be a justice and continue this journey, there's certain cases I can't take. There's certain places I can't go. There's certain people I can't connect with, and I would love to do it. And I remember thinking, who's really in prison and who's really free? We don't even know if there'll be a Supreme Court justice or judiciary by the time he becomes of age to get there. But I don't want to touch that right now. So I want to talk about who we help. I want to help you redefine what crisis is. It's not necessarily financial bankruptcy. Maybe it's you came into a lot of money. There are folks that I work with, the money has helped destroy them. They got paper dollars, but their self-image didn't catch up with the paper dollars. And so they're looking in the bottom of a bottle to try to find out who they really are. And the money is what's accelerated the things that are hurting and killing them. And lastly, I want to give you a mini masterclass on 3 practical steps that I took. 3 practical steps that I teach people through. 3 practical steps that you can take right where you are to stop digging and start climbing. Excuse me, I'm about to go, but excuse me, sir. Excuse me, ma'am. Your life is waiting. This is not a dress rehearsal. Your life is waiting. Your life is waiting. There is somebody that is waiting, some communities that are waiting for you to walk into purpose. And I know what you went through might have hurt you. And I know what you suffered through might have hurt your self-esteem. But I'm here to tell you, at some point, you've got to stop digging and start climbing. I was just talking to a family member earlier today. Precious family member, and talking about, well, I wish I had done this, and I wish I had done that, and I wish I had done. And I said, we've got to get out of the land of wish. You can't change 20 years ago. You can't change 20 minutes ago, but you can start again now. All right, let's get started. Tough times don't last, but tough people do. Could you say that with me? Tough times don't last, but tough people do. It's one of the lines that whether I'm at conferences speaking or I'm in colleges speaking or I'm in companies speaking, I have people repeat that tough times don't last. You want to know how you know tough times won't last? Because the good times didn't. As people who were living in the age of easy money and the money was just coming and they were speculating and maybe they didn't make such good decisions with stocks, but the stocks were just going up and up and up and up. You remember 2020 and 2021 and yeah, the good times. The good times. Business executives were ahead of themselves. I heard a few say, this is an employer's market. Some of them aren't talking that same talk. Because the truth of the matter is, good times won't last and bad times won't last. You know, the old Persian king, he had a great ring, and on the ring was inscribed what we would translate today as, this too shall pass. Can I just remind you of that? I had hard days, and I'm talking Daryl J. Bennett. I had hard days in my life. I had days where I didn't think I'd make it through the end of the day. There were days I woke up and wished just that I could go to sleep and never wake up again. There were days that I considered taking my own life. I just need to talk to you for a second. There were days where I wished for death. But you know what I realized? Those days came and they passed. They came to pass. Don't you get it? It came to pass. That day came to an end. What you're going through now won't last always. I'm going to tell you what we say in my faith tradition. Trouble won't last always. Tough times don't last, but tough people do. Now, in my book, Come Back Swinging, which is an audio book, you can get it on the Kindle as well as hardback, paperback. I share some of my personal journey through depression, through poor decisions as a younger man, through imprisonment, through transformation. And I talk about not just my personal story, but how I turned my personal story into a public platform to inspire and empower others. That's why I'm here today. Now, it's said, the Hebrews have said this, that a righteous man falls 7 times. A righteous man. And, at first blush, you would think, why would a righteous man fall 7 times? And there are those at the surface level that would look at that and say, yeah, but he rises again and becomes righteous despite the falls. But actually what we know is that he becomes righteous because of the falls. I'm not here to glorify bad decisions, and I'm not here to glorify bad judgment, and I'm not here to glorify bad things that happen in people's lives. And I'm not here to answer the question, why do bad things happen to good people or good things happen to bad people, if you think there's a such thing. But I do want to say this, that what you thought was your worst moment might be exactly what you need to propel you into your destiny. The best thing that ever happened to David was Goliath. Didn't look like it at the time. Didn't seem like it at the time. But what are you crying about today that later on you'll be rejoicing about? Not because of the thing itself, but because of what it made you, because of what it showed you, because of how it showed you who in your life was really for you. See, I'm going to tell you something about crisis. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I got to say this. Crisis will reveal to you who's really your friend. For real. I know you think because they came to your bar mitzvah, and I know you think because they were there at the christening of your firstborn, and I know you think because they toasted with you when the company went into the IPO phase. I know you think that they're for you, but let there be a bad rumor about you, because this is what I've learned. It's easy for people to like you when other people like you. And it's easy to put your hope in other people when you're being liked. But I have come to learn that crises will reveal to you who loves you. Yeah, crisis will reveal to you who's really in your corner. Crisis will reveal to you who are the people who are attached and who are the people that are assigned. I don't even have time to get into that, because a lot of the people that you think are assigned in your life, they're attached. They're there for what they can get from you. They're there because you're a stepping stone on the ladder for them to climb to the next place. And the minute you are no longer good for them, they're going to walk out of your life and they'll act like they'll never knew you. I've seen it happen. Not just with myself. I've seen this happen with close people. People who were household names, for one thing, and let one rumor come out about them. I wrote Comeback Swinging because I understood that it wasn't enough for me to just come out of what I came out of. I wanted other people to know that there is a place and a space for grace for you two to prevail over what was meant to destroy you. You know, there is the story of the master who healed the man, and the man who was brought to him on the bed, he commanded now that when he was healed, now I want you to carry the bed and go back to your home. What are you lying in that you're meant to carry? What is it that's in your life that you thought would keep you crippled forever because that's how maybe you were born, or that's what people said was your lot in life, or that was the result of bad decisions you made or choices that other people made for you? And what is it that you're actually lying in that you're meant to carry? I wrote Comeback Swinging because I wanted people to understand that there is life after death, and there are many types of deaths. There are many types of deaths. Please believe. In fact, there's many types of deaths, and I don't think there's a such thing as a death that most people talk about. I don't think there's ever just an end where life just is no more. No, I think it goes from one phase to the next. Hasn't that been the story of your life? Hasn't that been the story of people who've passed on in your life? They haven't died, not in your memory, not in your soul. And so this is as much about you as this is about your legacy. You have not just, this isn't just inspirational motivation to come back swinging, as it were. This is your responsibility. There are communities that are waiting for you to tell the story. There are communities that are waiting for you to be who you've been called to be. There's generations that are yet unborn that are seeking for you to come into a higher knowledge of yourself, to get past your ego, to get past what happened, to get past what people said about you, to get past what people may be still saying about you. But lastly, I wrote this because I wanted someone somewhere, somehow, to see themselves differently. How would you look at the world? How would you look at your situation if you saw it differently? Remember when a few years ago, it was this challenge on Facebook, and it was this one dress, and people were arguing over what color it was. And some people said it was one color and other people saw it was another color. And the truth of the matter is it was both colors, but people saw what they saw. I have found that life isn't so much about what happens to us or what we go through. It's the story we tell ourselves. That's why I wrote it. See, you have a narrative and then you have a story. You have a narrative you've been telling yourself about what transpired. I had a friend that I was working with, a sales executive, who told me that he couldn't get back up because of 20 years. He's making hundreds of thousands now, but he probably could be making millions. I'm sure he could be making millions. I was working with him and I see the potential in this man. And he said to me, he said, you know, Darryl, everybody's not like you. Because he's telling me about this business loss he had, and the way he's talking about it, I thought it was last year. I thought it was 2 years ago. I thought it was simultaneously with when I knew him. He was talking about something that happened in 2003. And how many of us could be going so much further, but we told ourselves a story. We told ourselves the story. We told ourselves the story because the business didn't work 20 years ago, that we are a failure. We told ourselves that story, and we rehearsed it. We told ourselves the story because the first marriage didn't work out, that I'm unlovable. And we told ourselves that story. Part of me writing the story again was rewriting my own story after it had been rewritten for me by the divine. Yeah. But let me not get into that because that'll take us somewhere totally different. Who we help. And then I'm going to talk about, how we help. Now I'm talking about who we help. We help people that are are going through trouble. Trouble comes in many ways. And there's 7 ways that I've come to identify folks that I've worked with and the reason why people call me. And at first I used to feel a little bad about this, to be honest. And I actually did probably a Facebook Live about 3 years ago. And I said, why do people only call me when they're going through stuff? Why are you not calling me when things are going well? But I've come to recognize that that's part of my purpose in life. I've come to recognize that, and I've actually come to embrace that. It was one brother that called me, and he said, my uncle just shot his wife and his son and turned the gun on himself. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't going to say anything. I just listened. And he said, I didn't know who to call, but I just knew to call you. There was a politician out in Chicago, elected official. And something came out about a scandal of his, and he had to resign. And he was talking about how everybody had walked away. Everybody, all of these people that he thought were his friends. And he said it was his wife that said, you need to call Daryl Bennett. So I've come to embrace the fact, I've really come to embrace the fact that part of my mission in life is not just to inspire, as it were, in great times, but to help push people out of a place of digging and to start climbing. Now, y'all can still call me when things are going well too, don't get me wrong. But I understand this. So there's 7 things that I've come to recognize that people reach out, really reach out. This is the trouble that I'm talking about. 1 is total loss. You've ever been in a car accident or seen a car accident where it's been totaled. I'm not talking about slight damage. I'm not talking about where it's just cosmetic. There are things that happen in our lives where it's a total loss and that you'll never be the same again. Financial devastation. There's a lot of people struggling with that now. And I'm not talking about people who don't have paper dollars. I'm talking about people who have a lot of paper dollars. But the problem is they're dealing with more debt. The problem is they're struggling at night trying to figure out how they're going to make payroll. The problem is they're still looking at what their company used to be 3 years ago. That's how it used to be. You need to pivot. You need to shift. They're up at night thinking about when they used to be a CEO. And that was their whole identity. Their whole identity was wrapped up in being CEO. And now they're no longer CEO. So now what? Or the company's gone. Now what? You want to know how many folks that I've worked with that when they sold the company, it was like they were selling their identity too, because their whole life was wrapped up in that. Imprisonment, incarceration, arrest, locked up, won't let me out. That's what Akon said. I work with people who, when the bars have been shut on you, now what? And I'm talking about people, there was one gentleman, because it's not everybody you think of. One gentleman I was working with, and I'm on the phone because his family had him reach out to me, and he said he was actually, let me get this right. I don't want to just say a prison guard, but he was let me get this right. He was one of the people in a prison in the South where he was one of the officials there. On Monday, I mean, he had done this for years, but on a Monday, he was still an official in the prison in the South. And by Friday, he was in New York on the way to suicide watch as an inmate. Now you think about how that would change somebody. You think about how that would destroy, because I don't want to say his whole life, but his whole adult life, he had been the one with the power. He had been the one with the keys. That's part of the reason why they moved him so far. They made an effort to make certain they moved him all the way across the country because they knew he knew things that other people didn't know. He was the one that was in charge of the jails in some cases. And part of what I had to work with him on is you've got to change how you identify yourself. You'll never be that person again. Even if you come out, and you will come out and you do greater things, and you will do greater things, but you'll never be that person again. Death. Somebody probably reading ahead of me said, well, how are you going to help somebody after death? I'm not talking about helping them, people. And what we've already talked about, death comes in many different ways, but even when we talk about physical death, there are some folks, it is hard for them to get past a death. It's just hard for them to get past a loved one. They could never imagine their life without the loved one. Disease, dis-ease, that comes in many different forms. I've worked with people where their dis-ease, particularly men, has affected their livelihood. That's a hard thing for a proud man. Relationship loss. I have found what will really move people is not so much the loss of a paper dollar, it's the loss of the relationships that sometimes comes because the loss of the paper dollar. People who you thought would go with you to the very end. They said they'd take a bullet for you. They swore whatever company you go to, they would be right there with you. And now where they at? Relationships. You know, it's said in the corporate world, people don't leave companies, they leave people. I found working with leaders of organizations, it's a struggle when people leave them. It makes them question themselves, and maybe rightfully so. It makes them wonder whether or not I'm truly even a good leader. And then lastly, spiritual transformation. A lot of people reach out to me because they're going through a period and a time and they can't really put their finger on it, but it is something spiritually that's happening that's changing everything in their life. Now, who are these people? Business executives. Already shared with you, probably more now than ever. I'm working with a lot of business executives. Because a lot of the folks, let me just say this, a lot of the folks you think got it ain't really got it. And I'm not talking about they didn't got it. Let me not use slang. They don't really have it. Excuse me. Let me use my proper grammar. And I'm not talking about they don't have the portfolio or the paper dollars. What they don't have is peace. A lot of them that have come to me. A lot of them are struggling with how to figure out how to move in this economy. You want to know why there was such a fight to go back to work? Because many of those leaders can't see their life without you being right under them for 9 hours out of the day, 10 hours out of the day. It wasn't about coming back so you could be more productive, because in many cases, the company still thrived when you were at home. But it was a level of control and identity. And who am I now if I don't have my employees right in front of me and I can't sashay down the hall? And I don't have a hall. And I have a virtual office. As quiet as it's kept, the people that had the hardest time doing this shift weren't necessarily the worker that was making minimum wage. Because the truth of the matter is, for people that's been struggling there in a lot of their lives and are used to struggle, they just see the next struggle and they keep on going. These were people who were people of affluence and influence, who were trying to figure out, no matter what they did to scare people, manipulate people, threaten people to come back to work, it still didn't happen. How many people changed their tune from leaders of companies to leaders of cities? We're dealing with that in New York City. Leaders of this city who swore for 2 years New York was going to go back the way it was, who recently, as of this year, came out and said, you know what? I realized the pandemic is bigger than me. You think? Who was it that said there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come? The time has come. It's time for a shift. And I have found that people who put their trust in money and in titles have the hardest time with a shift. High net worth individuals. Somebody once said to me, how are you going to help somebody who has more money than you? I said, well, first of all, let me get this straight. You might have the water, but I got the wine. There's a lot of folk that come to me because they might have more paper dollars today in their portfolio than what I might currently have, but they don't have more peace. They don't have more joy. In fact, they're spending a lot of that money on therapists. They're spending a lot of that money on other things to try to keep them satiated. They still, you want to know how many people will say, you're 38? How is that? You must have good genes. No, I got a good God. I got good grace over my life. There's an anointing on my life. I'm clear about that. When I walk in the room, things shift. There are deals that wouldn't go through lest I come in the room. So it's not just a smile and charisma and personality that I have. There's an anointing on my life. I'm clear about that. I'm not doing this in my own might and in my own power. So when I say high net worth individuals, I'm really saying so-called high net worth. Because the minute you count your net worth as a paper dollar, you've already lost. So the one person that said, what can you say to him? He's worth $1 billion. I said, well, I think he's probably worth more because he's part of the divine. How do you put your, because I know I'm worth, you can't put paper dollars on what I have. Are you kidding? And if you think I'm just being funny for a second, would you give up the use of your legs for $1 billion? You want to know how many people that's got money that they would just pay for a night of sleep? They would give it all away to have youth again. You can't pay for what God has put on my life. And so part of what I help people do is you need more peace. You need more joy. You need a different and a higher relationship with yourself. You need a better story. You need to change your identity. Elected officials, already told you, a lot of elected officials are living two lives. And I don't say that in a derisive way. They have a very public-facing, forward-facing life, but they understand that there's so many things they can't do. And I don't mean things like vices. No, that's not what I mean. I'm talking about a freedom to be and speak the way they want to speak. And in many cases, they feel caged in. Caged in by what would you say if they really came out and talk about the things that they really wanted to talk about. So they seek people like me so we could strategize. How is there a way? In what way can you release what's on the inside of you without losing your position? Although I'm the one to remind them, like Mordecai told Esther, maybe you came to the kingdom and received this position for such a time as this. That's a whole nother thing. I'll do a whole nother seminar on that. How a lot of people are running to be something instead of do something. You need to already be it. Leaders of movements. A lot of people don't know the stress that it is to lead a movement, to found a movement, to have people that you count as not just friends, but confidants who you've worked with and you've trusted and you've been with them in the worst and darkest situations of their life. And where are they when you struggle? And so I'm kind of combining this with also religious leaders. People come to me who are in positions of leading movements, leading churches, leading religious institutions who said, if other people knew I was struggling with this, half my congregation would walk away overnight. Overnight. Now you prayed for them in their worst moment and you helped them and they had 10 kids out of wedlock and they find out one thing about you. You help. I've seen this happen. I've seen people, I'm talking now religious leaders, who visited people in the prison and something happened with them. They didn't even end up in prison. Something happened with them. Maybe it was something legal, an arrest. And those same folks turned their back and said, well, no, because I don't want to get advice from somebody like you. Who was it? Groucho Marx, the comedian in jest, who said he resigned from that club that he was a part of. He said he didn't want to be a part of a club that would allow him to be a member. This isn't just from my own life of having led movements and done with things and coaching other people. This is something that I saw even as a young boy. My mother's husband was a pastor. And I watched how people, when we started that church, I watched how people said, we will be there with you to the end. They didn't make it 3 Sundays when there were no people in the pews. 3 Sundays. I'm not exaggerating. And I watch, and I say it respectfully, I watch how it crumbled his self-esteem because people he swore would never walk away. And I learned as a young boy, people will say what is convenient at the time, but you better not put your trust in people. You can love them, you can be friendly, you can corral with them, you can have them over at your house, but you better know that there are very few people that will ride with you. Recent graduates, this was my struggle. I spent so much of my time in school and community. We kind of take for granted that it's not just school, it's community. I thrived in community. I thrived at Morehouse College. I thrived at Harvard Law School. I thrived in the structure of community, of going to class, of having things to do, of student government, of being with people. And the moment that that community was now dissolved and I was now kind of out on my own, it was a struggle for me. And it took me many years to realize that was part of the struggle. My identity was wrapped up in being a student. And when I talk about recent graduates, I'm not just talking about people, I'm definitely not talking about people who graduated from high school. And I'm not even necessarily talking about people who graduated from college. I'm talking about people who graduate out of grad school, particularly very prestigious grad schools, because these are the people that many times their part of their identity is tied up in the schools that they've gone to. And people have tethered themselves to you and attached themselves to you, but it was convenient to. It was convenient to say, yo, my boy go to Harvard. Yeah, that's my boy. But are they really your friends? And so I work with people as they are leaving one community, how you can begin to create another community, how you can begin to identify yourself differently. You got to find your tribe. Everybody needs a tribe. Let me just say that. Everybody needs a tribe. And then I work with people who are resetting in life, and that comes in many different ways. I was going to put here people in transition, but I knew if people just read that, because a lot of people are thinking at the base level, you're going to think I'm talking about transitioning by gender. I'm not talking about that only. I'm talking about resetting. I'm talking about transitions, real catastrophic, cataclysmic transitions in life where you know you'll never be the same. Metamorphoses. You need somebody that's going to be a confidant to you, not somebody that's going to judge your every step. Somebody that's going to help you see your life differently, see your world differently, see your place in the world differently, that it's okay to reset. Because for many of you, when I say you, many of those who are going through a reset, many people are resetting because what they had purported to be wasn't who they really were. That wasn't the real them. I know I said elected officials had two faces, and I didn't mean that in a bad way. I meant a public, forward-facing face profile, and then how they are in private. But I think that's all of us in life. And some of us, this is the problem. At least I can give my politician friends this as praise. Many of them at least know the difference. Do you not know if you're playing a character? Jim Carrey talked about that. He said, my whole life I've been playing characters, but the truth is I became really successful. This is what he said. When I just came to realize that the character Jim Carrey is a character too. Do you at least know that a lot of what you have presented to the world, presented on social media, in some cases presented to people in your own bed, spouses, I want to be careful with that. Spouses, loved ones, it's not really who you are. So yes, now that you've come into a high relationship with yourself, people are trying to guilt you into, oh, you've changed, but you needed to change because that wasn't really you. This is how I answer somebody when people say to me, and somebody said it to me recently, you know, you've changed a lot. I said, no, a lot changed me. There's a difference. Now, let me talk about how to stop digging and start climbing. I want to talk solutions. I want to talk how you can do what you can with what you have where you are. I want to talk about you can't change what happened in the past. Yesterday's news is yesterday's news. But I want to talk about how you can move forward and how you can become right where you are a higher, better, more profitable, prosperous, and purpose-driven version of yourself. I want you to start climbing. I want you to start climbing again. I want you to make the conscious decision that you right now, before I go further, because there's 3 things I'm going to talk about very quickly. But I want you to make the conscious decision, because that's where it starts, that you're going to stop digging. You're going to stop digging and you're going to start climbing. What's the first thing? You're going to have to redefine yourself. That's what I had to do. That's what I had to do. That's what I had to do. Who are you without that title? Who are you without that job? Let me get closer. Who are you without those relationships and without that reputation? Who are you for real? Who are you really? In some cases, redefining ourselves is defining ourselves authentically for the first time. For you to redefine yourself, you're going to have to take inventory of what you have. And you're going to have to really come to the core and ask yourself some deep questions. What am I really meant to do on earth? You know, I think everybody should be faced with their mortality at least once early in life. Because when you're faced with your mortality, it makes you start to ask yourself, if today were my last day, if, let's not make it so dramatic, if this were my last year, what would I spend my time doing? Would I still be at that job? What would I say that I've been holding back? What causes would I take up? That I've been waiting for the perfect moment. I've been waiting for the perfect moment in my career. And then I said, I'll do that. But what would I do? To redefine yourself, you're going to have to ask yourself some questions. You know, it said that answers are the employers, questions are the employers of answers. I'll say it a different way. Answers are the employees of questions. I know my LinkedIn audience will get that. You want more answers? You need to ask more questions. You want bigger answers? You need bigger questions. Heretofore, many of you have just been asking, how do I get more paper dollars? How do I help my business grow? I want you to ask yourself, how do you help yourself grow? Side note, your company, your business, your brand will never grow beyond your own mindset. That's why I love entrepreneurism, entrepreneurship. I think I just made that up. Entrepreneurship. That's why I love that. I love it so much. Because you can't talk about entrepreneurship without talking about personal growth. That's why I don't want to spend so much time talking about your job, what you get paid to do. I want to talk about your work, what you were born to do. Because when you start talking about your work, you have to talk about personal growth. Have you considered that your cash flow has less to do with the global economy and more to do with your personal philosophy? How do you define yourself? You know, when I either do business incubators or workforce development, or I'm working with people on how to level up in their professional careers, and we do mock interviews, one of my favorite parts is doing the mock interview and starting with the question, which a lot of interviews start with, tell me about yourself. You know why it's such a beautiful question? Because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth will speak. It is interesting to hear what comes out of people's mouth first. It's interesting to hear what people say about themselves. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. I don't have to say, tell me about your values. Tell me what you care about. Tell me what you really hold true to. Because all I have to say is tell me about yourself and let you go. And if I listen closely, I'm going to find out how you define yourself. What's the story you're telling yourself? That's what I think I'm really at. What's the story? What's the narrative? Is it a narrative of victimization? That you're the underdog? I had to work through that. That was part of why I made certain poor decisions in my life. I realized this when I came into a higher spiritual understanding of myself. I had always seen myself as an underdog. I had to change that. Because I had grown up in Baltimore City. Because I had seen so many things as a so-called Black male growing up in America. And I had tethered my identity to that. So when I told somebody I don't identify as Black anymore, and they looked at me like I was crazy, no, it's not that I don't identify as part of the African diaspora. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is I don't identify myself with a term that you came up with to describe me on a profile. No, I define myself as a child of God. I had to redefine myself. Now, I can't tell you how you're going to redefine me or define me. I had a grandmother that said, baby, it's not what they call you, it's what you answer to. What do you answer to? What do you, I'm going to use a word here. What do you vibe with most? On your Google feed and you're going through, is it stories of overcoming or is it stories of stuff that happened bad to people? Traumas and dramas. What story do you keep telling? That's part of the reason too why I wrote the book. Some people say, well, what happened? Read the book. I was on a radio show. Somebody said that. Well, we want to know. Well, hey, you can't always get what you want. You're going to have to read it or you'll watch it or you'll find out some other way. But I'm not going to rehearse trauma. Stop getting around people who want you to tell a narrative of you on the bottom. That's part of the problem with some of you. That's partly the problem. You've got too many times where your mouth is betraying what your heart really wants. And there's dreams and visions of greatness, but you keep getting around people who want you to talk about the addiction. And they want you to talk about that time when you were crazy out your mind. And they want to talk about how when you were so drunk that you couldn't remember it. And they want to be very careful of people who want you to rehearse dark times in your life. I know I keep going back to my grandmother, but she gave me one of the best education. I was, of course, raised. I was raised by my mother, but my grandmother, when I would go to see her in the summers, my grandmother hadn't even had an 8th grade education, but she gave me my first lesson before I ever went to law school. She said, before somebody asks you a question, Daryl, ask yourself why they're asking it. That's what I was thinking when that radio host asked me, why do you want me to talk about something that happened 10 years ago that I've written about and put stories out about? You can just as easily do. What's your real intention behind it? Even if it's not a conscious intention, I think it's a subconscious intention. Do you ever notice? And this is partly why I had to extricate myself from only working in social justice movements. And I want to say this clearly. And I don't mean this to be offensive to anybody, but part of the reason why I stopped working exclusively in those circles, because I found that people who struggle with trauma, they get together and they want to keep talking about their trauma. And I realized that wasn't healthy for me. I can't tell you what's healthy for you. I don't think it's healthy for you either. You keep swirling around in cat pee, you're going to come out smelling like one. But I want you to start talking about victories. I want you to start talking about times you overcame. When's the last friend who called you and said, tell me the last time something great happened? What happened good in your life? You got to redefine yourself. Do you define yourself by the worst moments or so-called worst moments or by the best moments? Bob Proctor, one of the people I love, I really love Bob Proctor, and I would encourage you to read and watch his material. He talks about a reference group. I think Brian Tracy also talks about that. A reference. Who's your reference group? That's the people that you most closely associate with, even if they are not personally interacting with you. Who do you see yourself most like? Is it the people who are constantly dealing with drama and trauma and struggle and bankruptcy and limits and issues and problems and troubles? Or is it people who've overcome? Two people can go through the same thing and one person comes out as an overcomer and they talk about overcoming. Is your reference group people who are champions, winners? And winners lose too, but winners have a mindset. Winners have a mindset. So you're going to have to redefine yourself. Second thing, you're going to have to strengthen what remains. What does that mean? You got to strengthen what remains because you can't strengthen what didn't remain. You can't strengthen who did walk out on you. When I was in France recently, I felt a little dumb because I asked the tour guide one of the places we went. I said, well, we were in Versailles. I said, well, where's Notre Dame? Is it open tomorrow? And she looked at me kind of like I was crazy. And she said, since the fire, it hasn't been open. And I'm thinking in my mind, what fire? but I know I stopped there because a few other people turned and looked at me like, the American. I'm thinking that news didn't reach me, but okay, so I guess it was a fire. So I did some research. And sure enough, there was a fire. It's several years ago, and it's still working to restore. And a lot of it was destroyed. And part of the restoration process was strengthening what remained. They couldn't build on top of anything until they strengthened what remained. What remained? So to strengthen what remained, we got to talk about, you got to take inventory of your life. What remained? So many people spend their life talking about who left and what got destroyed. You've got to stop doing that to yourself. You've got to strengthen what remains. I'll give it to you another way. You know how on maps it says you were here? It's a beautiful thing. I love that. You were here. It's a beautiful thing to know where you are, because it doesn't do me any good to see the map of the city and not know where I am. It doesn't do me any good to see the map of this great wide subway system or transit system and not know where I am in the mix. There's a beauty in knowing where you are. But so many people are trying to, this is where I should be. This is where I would have been. This is where, if that thing didn't happen to me as a child, I'd be here. Unfortunately, it did. And so you're not. If the pandemic didn't happen, I've got several people I work with, and that's almost like their mantra. If the pandemic didn't happen, well, it did. You've got to strengthen what remains. Can I tell you something? You'll never build on what left. So all you can build on is what left. I mean, is what remained. Who's remained in your life? Let me talk about relationships for a second. This is the beauty of crisis. It will reveal. That's what a fire does. It's revealing both a real fire and a figurative fire. A real fire in the sense that when the fire, and this is also what they were saying about Notre Dame, the fire exposed some things that they didn't know was there because stuff had been built on top of stuff. Because we have a tendency, now I'm coming into the figurative, we have a tendency to be so focused on image and cosmetics and superficiality in life and Instagram likes and Facebook reshares and who's my friend on social media that will cover things that we really need to be having exposed so we could treat. And so instead of dealing with the rotting wood, we paint over it. Instead of dealing with the crumbling foundation, we put another floor on it. And so while we don't glorify that the fire happened, we are grateful that the fire exposed some things that needed to be treated. Because the truth of the matter is, if the fire didn't destroy it, time was going to destroy it anyway. You got to strengthen what remains. Who in your life is calling themselves a friend? And when you really go through stuff, you'll see. Somebody once asked me, Daryl, based on what you overcome and what you went through, it's hard to kind of find pluses out of that. I say, I'll tell you one plus, and there's many, but I'll tell you one plus. The people that ride for me, they ride for me. I got people, I'll be on the other side of the world. I can call, they'll send a helicopter to come get me. You hear? I got people that will ride for me, and ain't nothing you can say, ain't nothing you can make up, ain't nothing you can pull from the past, ain't nothing you say, I fought this person. I got people that will ride for me, and you need people like that in your circle. I know the people, trust me. I know, what did the master say? I picked 12 of you, and I knew one of you was a devil. I know the people in my life that are just there. They're just there because I'm on the way up. I've got certain people that ostracized me and talked about me, and then now they see me doing the things that God is doing in my life. They say, I always knew that you would come back, and I knew you'd be better. You a lie, but I smile right in their face because that's how people will do. It's cool to like you when other people like you, but you got to know who's your real friends. Friends, how many people have them? You remember that song? What did Drake say? No fake friends. You got to know who are the people in their social media friends. They're friends because you got a lot of likes. They're friends because you got that job. They're friends because you're running that company. They're friends because they see you as an ATM machine. They're friends because you got good press. But you got to know the people who will ride for you. That's the people that you can build movements on. That's part of the reason why I'm able to do many of the things that I'm able to do. I've got great relationships. I've got great relationships. And as time has gone on, I've come to value the relationships more than the stuff. I've come to value people who I know have remained. You got to strengthen what remains. You'll never build on what left. And the truth is, you don't need what left. In my faith tradition, this is what's written. They went out from amongst us because they were never of us. Because look, this is how it finishes. Had they been of us, they would have never left. Let me tell you something. You can try to attach people with super glue. If they're not of you, they're going to find a way to walk away. And this is what I've learned. They'll use that as an excuse, but they were going to walk away anyway. It was the CEO I knew that said, I fired them today because they were going to quit tomorrow. Yeah, I knew who wasn't really with me anyway. Don't you be deceived into thinking because they think nice and kindly of you now that they'll always be there. And I'm not certain. I know there's people for a reason, in a season, like we say, in a lifetime. But I'm talking about strengthening what remains. We have a tendency, it's almost like, when you're younger, you go after the one that really don't like you that much, and the one that really likes you, And I've learned as I've gotten older and wiser to respect when people are in my corner. Respect that. And to stop trying to get more people rather than strengthening what remains. I'm talking to somebody who's a business leader right now. I know I am. And yes, you want more employees, but what about the ones you have? The ones that stuck with you through the pandemic, through the recession, through the back and forth of hybrid work and come to work 3 days and come to work 4 days and now you can go back 2 days. Who are the ones that stuck with you? Stuck with you that maybe when payroll didn't come through at all times, and stuck with you when the stock ticker wasn't what the stock ticker wasn't supposed to be, and stuck with you when their stock options were worthless and worth less than the paper that they were printed on. Who are those people? And how do you strengthen what remains? I know you want another business deal and I know you want to acquire more businesses, but what would your life look like if you strengthen what remains? And this is my last one, which is really where I wanted to start. But I knew if I started here, people would think I'm just trying to be emotional, but you got to forgive yourself. Ooh, you got to forgive yourself. This is the hardest thing. You want to know why it's hard for people to forgive others? Because it's hard for us to forgive ourselves. I had to work through this. Somebody was questioning me about something, and I looked at him to help him understand, and I looked him dead in the eye. I said, there's a lot of things. I look up at the ceiling at night and stare and wonder, but I'm not going through that with you. I'm not talking about that with you. Yes, there's things I look back. That's part of why I wrote Come Back Swinging about. Oh, yes. I don't glory in negativity. I don't glory in bad decisions and bad judgment. But I know that part of my journey to restoration and to acceleration was to forgive myself. Oh, no, you might never forgive me, but I don't need your forgiveness. That's the truth. I've got to have it. We've all had to withdraw from the bank of grace many times. But why it's hard for us many times to forgive others or to see others in the same light and grace that we wish to have for ourselves, it's because we hold ourselves in bondage. And part of you releasing yourself into your next level is to release the art that you're holding against yourself, the offense. That's the beauty of the divine, the presence that's never in absence. The love that carried you and created you and purposed you. He's not holding it against you. Why are you holding it against yourself? There's no stop. There's no ticker like CNN in heaven where there's breaking news and God's like, oh my gosh, what happened? I didn't know. It may have shocked you. But before you ever had the problem, the solution was in place. And there is no height, and there is no depth, and there is no power, and there is no principality, and there is nothing on this earth or under this earth that can separate you from that love. but do you know it? Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself, one, because you can't change it. Which one of you by word can add 1 cubit to your height? Or change one thing that happened in the past? In fact, the more you focus on it and become maniacal about it, the more stuff that's going to happen in your life that even magnifies it more. I don't know why I need to say this, but I need to say this to somebody. I don't read stuff people write about me on the internet. So for some of you, you might be more versed on what may have been written negatively than I am. I learned that a long time ago. I learned that when I was still at Harvard. I was a class marshal at Harvard Law School, and we went to class one time, a party. I got to a party. This is when Twitter kind of first started. I told you I'm 38. So this is when Twitter really kind of got big. This is in 2000, I'm going to say 9. And I get to this party, true story. And a few people were kind of acting a little weird around me. I wasn't thinking much of it. Finally, one of my homeboys pulled me aside. He said, "Yo, you good?" I'm like, "Yeah. What's up?" He said, "I just didn't know because of what they're saying about you." And come to find out, it was a site. I'm not going to give the name of the site to even give it any credence, but it was a site where it was talking about people's tweets, and people were talking about the things I had put on Twitter and saying things about me online. I didn't even know. I wasn't even aware of the site. So clearly I was fine. I wasn't aware of it. I did go on the site. I did look at it. I did feel bad. I did delete tweets. I did think about what I wrote. I did question myself and all this other stuff. And it probably was wise that I don't put all of the things in Twitter that's on my mind. But this is the reason I'm sharing this with you. I made a promise to myself then. I don't care who brings something to me. I don't need to read it. I know who I am. You don't. And that was the irony. The people that were saying these things about me didn't even go to the school. But they were writing as if they did. And I learned that early on. Stop reading stuff that people say about you. Stop crowdsourcing your emotions. That's a whole nother thing. That's part of why it's hard for some of you to forgive yourself. You put too much on social media and you're looking for social media for therapy. Social media is not a therapeutic space. It's actually the opposite. Stop looking at the comments, looking for some type of feeling better about yourself. They're going to say what they're going to say. A lot of times, these people that are sitting on the internet anyway with comments, you ain't got nothing else to do. Forgive yourself. And by forgiving yourself, love yourself, know yourself, and understand some people may never get it. I know I'm not some people's cup of tea, but that's the beauty in who I am. I wasn't like this before. I wanted to be all things to all people. But I came to understand some people, you may never like me. You may never like, and that's fine. That's fine. But I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to walk out the call of God that's on my life. And while I would like to be liked, don't get me wrong, I would like to have man's approval. At the end of the day, that's not the measuring stick of my life. And I don't think it should be the measuring stick of your life either. This is where I want to end. It's time to stop digging and it's time to start climbing. That's why I shared this. That's why I talked about my life. Whenever you hear me share any of my personal business, it's really because I believe it's going to bless somebody else. Otherwise, I wouldn't. Because respectfully, it ain't your business. But I share it with you because I want you to know this isn't something that I read in a book or something that I saw on a YouTube video and now I'm just rehearsing it and spitting it back out to you. I've lived this. I've lived what it's like to have to restart again. I've lived what it's like to have to redefine again. I've lived what it's like to look up and wonder, will I ever be that person again? And the answer is no, I don't need to be that person again because that thinking is what got me there. So I needed to change. I needed to become better. I needed to become a higher, more authentic version of myself. I'm sharing with you because I believe that the more a rising tide raises all ships, and the more that we have grace for ourselves and each other, the better the world would be. We'd have less toxic work environments. We really would. Many of us wouldn't I say us to just include me in this, wouldn't even be at the same working and doing the same things we were doing. Because many of us, the truth of the matter is, we're living below our means because we're afraid of what would life be like if I stepped into. And I'll do a seminar on that, how to get beyond the fear and start moving in faith in a practical way. But this is about how to stop digging and start climbing. Now I have a number and I have an email on the screen. If you or someone you know needs to rise again, and I don't know what your situation may be. Maybe it's legal. Maybe it's medical. Maybe it's relationship. Maybe it's professional. Maybe it's personal. Maybe it's relational. Maybe it's an identity crisis. Maybe it's a reset in life. Maybe it's a restart in your career. Maybe it's a transition after school. Maybe it's a needing to go back to school. I don't know what that is for you. But I believe if you watched me this entire time, there's something that nudged you in your heart to show you where you need to rise again. And we all have a space. The truth of the matter is where we need to rise again. This number is being manned. You call this number, and I have people on standby. We want to help you rise again. You were born to fly. I know that they tell you to conform. I know that they tell you to just fit in. I know that they tell you just shut up, sit down, don't say nothing. And this is one of the ways that the educational system, particularly in the Western world, has failed us. Because you sit there for hours and years on end, listening to other people drone on and on about information that you could probably get at your fingertips in Google, and you never really learned about yourself. And the people that were teaching never took the time to learn about you. So you got information, but you didn't get insight. So you got the degree, but you still don't know what you're called to do. And you're at the job, but you still don't know your work. And you built the company, but you're still not convinced that you're walking in meaning and purpose and power. And that's why you're angry. That's why you're fussing at your spouse. That's why you're mad at the cat, because you're still trying to figure out who you are. And that's fine. But I want you to know, if you're going to stop digging and start climbing, there's going to be some practical things you're going to have to do. And you're going to have to get around people, a community of people that can help you, a tribe of people that can help you. You need people to help counsel you to walk you through this. I think this is where I want to end. It's written somewhere that those who sow in tears, bearing precious seed, will reap, no doubt, reap in joy, bearing sheaves. And I want you to know there is a harvest for you. There is a harvest for you. There is a harvest for you. Your best days are in front of you. The greatness of your life has just begun to unfold. There is something somewhere that you are meant to do that's going to change the world. I don't want you to be conformed to the pattern of this world. I want you to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You're going to rise again. You might cry today. You might hurt today. You might stumble today. You might question your meaning in your life and whether it's even worth living today. But I am here to tell you that you were born to rise again. And there was a life you were born to, but there's a life that you're destined to. And I want to help you get there. I want to help you rise again. My name is Daryl J. Bennett, and I want to thank you for listening. Share this with someone you know who needs it now. Thank you.